Happy Sunday morning to you all. It is Steve Buchanan. It is Julian Edlow. It is Josh Applebaum. We all be going to be with you for the next 2 hours, talking a little bit of everything here on a jam-packed Sunday full of all types of sports. We have some bets to talk about. We have a few guests coming on, Stormy Bonantoni. We have Will Hill coming on, both from VSiN in the second hour, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But guys, let's get into what was a dynamic Saturday of football, except if you were an underdog. That did not work out for either of the underdogs in this one. Painfully for the Packers, too, as well.
One covered.
Worked out for a lot of Packers
they
plus
covered.
10 people.
You know what? But the Packers should have won that game. The graphic says pretty good for the 49ers. I would say just enough that the 49ers were able to escape the grasp that the Packers had the entire game there. 49ers lost Deebo Samuel. Really seemed like it changed the complexity of that offense. That offense really seemed to sputter in there. And then how about the dropped pick six by Savage in the beginning of that game? Really would have changed the outcome of this game. We'd be talking about a Packers team that is going on to the championship here. Julian, let's start with you here. What was most impressive about the 49ers comeback to win this game 24-21?
That they were down, 7 going into the fourth quarter, win the fourth quarter 10-0, and change that Kyle Shanahan stat and perception that when trailing going into the fourth quarter, they don't win games, which had been true all the way until last night. When the Niners had faced adversity this season, they hadn't been able to rally and come back. So to do it, would it have been nice to do it in some of the other games? Sure. But to do it for the first time when they absolutely had to do it to save their season with their backs against the wall was impressive. It was a very close game that, a couple of bounces the Packers' way, and it's a completely different ball game. But, all in all, that final drive by Brock Purdy was pretty impressive when they absolutely had to have it.
Josh, what do you think was the reasoning for the 49ers' kind of struggles throughout the game? Was it the early injury to Deebo Samuel, who, we had different reports. First they said it was a head injury and he was cleared. Then it was a shoulder injury. Yep. We saw him come out of the halftime without a jersey, so, obviously it indicates that he's not going to be playing here. But the offense really kind of sputtered without him. Was it that they were playing from behind, or was it really that Deebo was just kind of like that final piece in the offense, and when you take that out, now things go a little bit of awry?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of factors here, Steve. So definitely the Deebo Samuel injury. You can really tell when he's in the game versus out of the game. The stats really back it up. He's so dynamic, whether he's running it, whether he's catching it. Him being out really makes their offense. They're still a good offense, but takes away really their most lethal weapon here. Also, I would say, these first-round teams or their first-round seeds coming off a bye here. Again, there's a little bit of a rest versus tired situation. You're glad that you're rested, but you haven't played in a while. Remember, the 49ers sat a lot of guys in Week 18 as well, so it took them a little bit of time to get going. We saw the same thing in the Texans game, where maybe the Ravens there in that spot were a little bit sluggish there to start. I'll look at it from a couple different directions, Steve. I'm just glad one of the dogs covered, because going into yesterday, I had all my system matches on both dogs. Obviously, Texans hang tough, then they get blown out in the second half, and then they lose that game and don't cover. And then I was looking at the next game like, this is a repeat situation here where the contrarian play with the 49ers was getting late steam. I think they got up to 10.5 even. I think one book may even got to 11. So I'm like, this isn't good. So at least one dog came through for you. But it's heartbreaking if you're on the money line there with the Packers, Steve. You had this game in hand. Obviously, Carlson misses that kick, which is really difficult. And I don't want to put a ton on, Love. I don't want to bash him, because he really had a great game, made some incredible throws in bad weather in the rain. But you have 50-plus seconds left. You have two timeouts. You force it into triple coverage on the run. Again, he had a great year. I think there's a very bright future. I'm going to really look at maybe the over-win totals on both the Texans and the Packers next year. But that inexperience factor finally reared its ugly head. How many times has Love been in that spot? Down with the game on the line. I think he's going to learn from that. But obviously, if you're a money line bettor here with the Packers, they cover the number, but they should have won that game.
Theoretically.
That's directed at you, Steve. Well, so you can give your thoughts on your Packers and your Jordan Love. I thought Jordan Love showed a lot in that game.
I'll tell you what, if they had won that game, they might be the team to beat in the NFC. Agreed. With the way that they look. That was probably the best game we've seen from Aaron Jones. He was unstoppable in that game. Breaking tackles, getting over the line to gain. He was phenomenal. But what I kept thinking about in that game is that if they had one real receiver, how much difference that offense would be. Like if you had a solidified veteran in that receiver room, how much different that could be. Because granted, Love was making some unbelievable throws, some tight window throws. He was very poised in the pocket, but like it felt like he needed that one guy. That was the one missing piece.
Devontae Adams.
Doesn't it seem like, though, they have three guys in Dobbs and Watson and Reed that can all develop into that type of guy?
Well, 100%.
Three good, but they're all young, and one of them is going to turn into like a Pro Bowl level receiver, you would think, and the other two are probably going to be better than your average 2-3.
100%. But think about those guys with a true wide receiver
right now.
Like
sure,
you are, and so like okay, so let me throw this to you. What does this team look like for next year? How do you view this team going into next year now?
They will be, favored to make the playoffs, obviously, in the NFC, which they just snuck in to get that 7 seed, so it's not like they were a sure thing all year. And they'll be right up there with the Lions to win the division, but they might not even be favored over the Lions. We could be talking about the Lions next week as a team that goes to San Francisco and plays a good game. So I think they'll be right there with the Lions as one of the favorites in the division and a team that's favored to make the postseason.
Yeah, definitely a lot of question marks.
9.5 wins, let's call it.
Okay.
Win total.
Definitely a lot of question marks coming into Division 2 as well on the direction of the Vikings, who need a quarterback now because Kirk Cousins is a free agent, and then what they do with the number 1 pick, Justin Fields. So a lot of question marks for that one there. Let's move over to the other game that happened, the earlier game. The tale of two halves, I guess you could say. Going into the half, this game was tied. We're going in there. This looks like this is going to be a competitive game. I don't know what happened in the locker room after that, but then we saw two different teams come out of that locker room for the second half. Texans were shut out. The only touchdown they scored was that special teams return there by Sims. Other than that, it was just consistent pressure on C.J. Stroud, not able to throw and not able to throw downfield. So now you eliminate the threat of Nico Collins because he's not like this small A-dot guy. He's like a deeper downfield guy. You eliminate that, then all of a sudden this offense looks pretty flimsy, and I think that's what we saw there, Josh.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Steve. So I think Monken, obviously the offensive coordinator, I was on Twitter, he got a ton of credit here for adjustments, and you get to this time of year, that's huge. Again, you're going to play your first half. What do you do at halftime? What adjustments can you make? Ravens obviously look great going in the second half. To me, the Texans are a team, again, just like the Packers. It's ironic, both these games, you had these big 1 seeds who end up winning the game, but I think looking toward the future, both dogs you're pretty bullish on. So Texans are a team with a lot of young players. Stroud obviously had a little bit of a reality check here, and I'll give some credit to you, Steve, because I threw at you guys yesterday the total in this game.
Yeah.
Now this is so important because one, it goes to show you how good the odds makers are. The odds makers at DraftKings, Johnny Avello, the people who set the odds. These odds are so sharp, which makes sports betting difficult to beat. Because what did the line close at, Steve? 44.
Yep.
However, it opened as high as 47. It got down to 43.5. It ends up landing on 44. So what does that tell us? It tells us that if we're going to play some unders, we got to get these numbers early before they fall too much. Or do you see a number fall so much? And I think this is where you were leaning, Steve. If it's fallen so much, does it create value to go the other way and go over? So, imagine if you got an early, anything under 44.5, you go over 43.5. You could have theoretically middled it here. But I think it just goes to show you when you're betting these totals, if you wait too long, like I always want to be on the sharp side. The under seemed to be the sharp side. But you got to remember, sharps got it at a higher number than you were betting if you were getting it late. So, again, if you got it early, you love that under. Tucker makes that that field goal there at the end. But again, I know a lot of people who bought low and went over 43.5 and also won.
Julian, the Texans really deviated from their usual plan. They were blitzing Lamar Jackson midway through the third quarter almost 70% of the time, when on a normal game, averaging 30% for an entire game. But yet that still was not enough to stop Jackson.
So they basically doubled up on the amount of pressure that they wanted to put on Jackson. And what did Jackson do? He used his legs, which he hasn't done as much this season.
Over 100 rushing yards.
Yep. He's become a much better pocket passer over the course of his career. But if you're going to do something different to him, then Baltimore's going to do something different, which was kind of retro Lamar Jackson, just running some of them right down the middle for massive gains. And obviously the 2 touchdowns, getting into the end zone when it mattered. So I think the Texans had a good game plan to kind of defend the newly evolved pocket passer, Lamar Jackson. But as the MVP, you got a deep bag, and he went back to, what he's capable of doing on the ground, and Texans paid for it.
So now moving forward, the Texans are done, have a lot to think about here. Obviously Nico Collins is in the mix, Tank Dell, which a lot of us forget about.
They have a lot of free agents on
They have a lot of free
Texans,
agents. Yeah, Dalton Schultz is one of the headliners there for, at least on offense, for free agents. What does this team look like next year? Obviously, tough division, with the Jaguars and everything. The resident Jaguar guy is not here to bellyache about it. But, what do they look like going into next year? Can they compete with the Jaguars in this division again next year, Josh?
Absolutely. I think they could win this division. I mean, you look at the quarterback is the most important player on the field, and they got it right with C.J. Stroud. And there's been a lot of talk about how obviously the Carolina Panthers might have regretted their decision. Stroud was much better this year, but also Stroud was in a much better situation. So I'm bullish on Stroud, even though obviously, you lose this game, you don't cover the number. He still took his team very, very far, and I give him a lot of credit for that. So again, can you continue to build through the draft? They have a lot of young players. This is a team that's kind of young and on the rise, and I think depending on their win total, they obviously go over the number this year. I think they could be a favorite to win that division next year.
8 picks coming up in the draft for Houston.
Houston's in a great spot. I'll just say the rest of the division is not too shabby either. You still got Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. We have to discover what Anthony Richardson is.
Yep.
And I know you are maybe even a Will Levis guy. So a lot of young quarterbacks, young pieces in the division. We'll still find out. It could be a good division next year.
Good divisional games yesterday, should be even more here today. We're going to start breaking down Bucks and Lions. Who's going to come out on top on this one? We'll be right back with our answers. Welcome back to the Sweat. Steve Buchanan, Julian Edlow, Josh Applebaum. We're going to start breaking down the divisional round games that we have coming up here on Sunday, starting with the Bucks at Lions. Should be a very high-flying offensive game that we have in this opening contest here. Here's the tale of the tape. Here are how these teams are matching up against each other here. Really got to point out there, yards allowed by the Lions, 425. Nearly double of what the Buccaneers have allowed during the regular season thus far. Gentlemen, and I'm sorry, that was last week. My apologies. Let's giving out all this misinformation. Gentlemen, let's break this game down here. I'm going to start with you, Josh, because I want to talk about the spread on this one here. Throughout the week, this is pretty much held steady at 6. But over the past 24 hours, we've been seeing it get down to -5.5, but almost quickly gets back up to 6 after that. What do you make of that constant back and forth, that ping pong effect that we've been seeing over the past 24 hours?
Yeah, this is great late movement here toward the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm taking the Bucks and the points today, guys. If you look at, Steve, we go back even a little bit earlier in the week. Detroit opened -6. They got up to 6.5. Even some books touched 7, and that was a very brief 7. Got down to 6.5, and as you mentioned, Steve, sat 6.5 for much of the week. But really, late game day movement is so important to me because that's telling me that when the limits are raised, big bets come in. You always want to be on the side of late movement if you can help it. And if you bet a game earlier in the week, you want that late movement to kind of validate a play that you've made and give you some closing line value. So late movement to me, Steve, and again, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. It's breaking toward the Tampa Bay Bucks. What I really like about the Bucks is the fact that they're a contrarian play. They're only getting 36% of bets. If we look toward yesterday, both those dogs were public plays. Both the Texans and the Packers were getting around 60 to 65% of bets. You don't have that situation here. Public is all over Detroit. They're kind of falling in love with a Cinderella story. You got Eminem in the stands. Ford Field is going nuts. This is a team that was a terrible team for so long, and they're finally good again. So I think there's kind of a public sentimentality in favor of Detroit getting 2/3 of bets in this spot. But again, late movement is breaking back toward the Bucks. So I like the Bucks and the points here. You would have loved a 6.5 early in the week. That number is now gone. But once again, Tampa Bay is one of the best teams in the NFL covering numbers. They're 12-6 ATS. They're 9-3 ATS as a dog. And I'm going to lean on their defense here. Their defense is only giving up 18.6 points per game. That's the 5th best in the NFL. And you mentioned it, Steve. Look what happened last week with the Lions. They got shredded there through the air, mostly through the air, but they're giving up on the year 23.2 points. That is 23rd in the NFL. And then a little bit of a small angle here. Bill Vinovich is one of the best road referees in the NFL, 59% against the spread to the road team. So again, public's all over Detroit, yet this line's coming back to the Tampa Bay Bucks. This is a wheelhouse play for me. Contrarian with late sharp action. I love the Bucks plus the points here.
Julian, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but the Bucks have been one of the best as a road underdog at covering the spread this season.
Yeah, they've been great on the road, period, where they're 8-1 against the spread. And they've been great as an underdog this season where they're 9-3 against the spread. So this spot is kind of their wheelhouse. A lot of pressure on the Lions. Not that I don't think they'll come through, but the Lions was the only game last week where the spread did matter. Lions win, Rams cover. I could see a similar situation today. I think this is going to be a close game, which puts me towards the points. I had Tampa earlier in the week teased up to 12.5, and I personally used it with Kansas City to 8.5. Maybe you could have used it with one of the favorites yesterday, but it's a good game to take the points here. And really, I lean to the dog because I think it's going to be such a close game. We're going to see a lot of offense and just how good Tampa's been in this spot. This is the best prop game of the weekend. I think there's a lot of player props in this game that I want to be betting.
Let's get into that. Let's talk about some of the player props that you like in this one. I know a popular one here is Baker Mayfield passing yards. This has continued to go up throughout the week. It is currently at 260.5. If you were watching the show yesterday, you could have got that at 258.5. So not a huge difference, but that total is obviously on the rise. Give us some of the props that you like in this game.
Yeah, I want to be hanging out with the cool kids. Give me Baker Mayfield passing yards over. I put it in my article on DK Network at 253.5 earlier in the week. It's getting bet up quite a bit, but 260.5 is not much cause for concern here when we look at the numbers. The Lions' third worst passing defense on the season in terms of yards per game allowed, and they have fallen off a cliff lately. Nearly 350 yards per game through the air over the last 3 games. I think it's almost 380 over in the secondary. They are not playing well, and Baker Mayfield comes into a game having played really well last week. It was his third 300-yard game over his last over his last 5. 4 of them he's gone for 280 plus. And he's going indoors, with some rhythm. I think that Baker Mayfield is in a great spot. And in terms of guys you might want to put with him, the yards have to go somewhere. I think my 2 favorite, Mike Evans is going to get a lot of attention just because of the size. We talked about that on yesterday's show with Jeff in the DFS segment. I think Godwin is going to get that Puka matchup that he had last week and be in a really good spot. And then Cade Otton, who's been playing really well lately, and we know all season Detroit has struggled with tight ends. That's a really modest one. I think that's like 30 yards. So those 2 guys, if you want to play them as straights, same game parlay for the passing game, I like all that stuff.
Yeah, maybe Otton didn't get into the end zone last week, but 8 receptions on 11 targets for 89 yards. Like
that was drops.
That was
some meat on the bone.
That was an absurd number for him. Josh, going right back to this Baker Mayfield stuff, like if you look at the matchup that Mayfield had last week against the Eagles, and we talked about this on the show, you talk about the Commanders, how bad they've been in the secondary. Coming into that game last week, the Eagles had allowed only 47 yards less to opposing wide receivers. Mayfield in that game was 22 of 36 for 337 yards. Now gets a similar matchup here today against the Lions.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to bet this Baker Mayfield over. And again, listening to the show yesterday, you could have gotten a better number, 258.5. It's now 260.5. Not only has it risen 2 yards, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when these props move, it's very important here, telling you smart money's coming in. But it's 260.5 over minus 125. So if you wait until game time today, this thing might get up to 261 or more. My only concern with Baker, I like the matchup. It's indoors. You're going up against a really bad secondary here that got torched by Stafford last week. He had, 367 against them. Is that, Steve, anytime I'm on Twitter and I see tweets that are like, the most bet prop today, 99% of money are on the over, that always scares me. So that's my one concern with Baker. I still like that angle, but you guys mentioned the guy that I'll be on today. I love Cade Otton in this spot. Cade Otton going over 29.5 receiving yards. It's minus 110. He's cashed over last week. You mentioned Steve had a great game against Philly, 8 catches for 89 yards. Also, he had 8 targets. He got targeted more, almost double than any other guy. I think, whether it's Evans or maybe it was Godwin. They had like 3 or 4. So he's really been a go-to guy. Baker, obviously, and I think it's also too when you have these great wideouts on the edges, Otton can really feast over the middle. If he's going up against a defensive back who's smaller than him or a linebacker who's slower than him, great matchup in that situation. He's gone over this number in 5 of his last 7 games. And you mentioned the Lions. They've given up the 9th most yards to tight ends this year. So again, Baker seems like a great play. I'm rooting for you guys. It worries me how it's moved so much. I hope you guys cash. But I'm going to go Cade Otton over 29.5. Really targeting these these tight ends. You had Kittle go over yesterday, Schultz go over yesterday. Hopefully Otton's the guy today to get 30 or more.
And then one thing we can talk about too is that obviously this is one of the highest totals here that where it's sitting at. That also could be a lot of touchdowns in this game. There's a lot of anytime touchdown guys you can choose from that I think are interesting here. I already have Sam Laporta as an anytime touchdown score at plus 125. It's at plus 115 now. If you look at his numbers from last week, his ADOT was pretty low. Obviously coming back, he had a hyperextended knee, a bone bruise. Shocked that he was even playing in that game last week, but he's out there, and he has the 2nd most targets in the red zone on the Lions at this point. So a high-scoring game here. Like the chance of Laporta to get into the end zone. Do either of you guys have a anytime touchdown or even like a first touchdown scorer that you like in this game that should have a lot of offense?
I think just numbers-wise, I guess Otton is a guy that I like, and I think he's...
Plus 280,
Yeah, he's priced pretty long, and that number's come down. I think 350 was available earlier in the week, so maybe the value isn't quite there as much. Otton would be the guy for me that I think the most value is still on, though, and Godwin plus 205. I mean, the two guys I talked about yardage-wise, I guess if I like their yardage, I think they have a good chance to break one. I think those are the 2 guys I would be looking at.
The thing with Godwin, though, he only had 4 touchdowns during the regular season. Like, he hasn't been the go-to guy in the red zone. Most of his touchdowns have come from outside the red zone, but 2 in his last 3 games.
He caught last week. He caught the bomb at the end of the game. You see what Puka did last week in this matchup. Caught a 50-yarder. It's probably going to be one of those you go over the yardage prop and catch the long touchdown and clean it all up in one play if it gets there.
Josh, anywhere you want to go in this game now, is there anything specific that you're looking at? It can be a prop, it can be a total, it can be a alternate line. What else are you looking at in this game?
So I'll mention a anytime touchdown scorer, David Montgomery. It's minus 120, so you are paying a little bit of juice here, but obviously it's not a McCaffrey like minus 400 or anything. But Montgomery had a touchdown in the game there against the Rams. He had I think he's had a 13 on the year. He had his 14th in the postseason. This guy, when you get into into the red zone, and if it's, they're in within the 10 yards of scoring, he gets a lot of carries in this spot. So I think that's kind of a decently priced number. But I'll just mention the over or the total in this one. I'll throw it to you guys because it did move up. It was 49 up to 50. It got hit a little bit under 50. It's now down to 49.5. I like the bet split to the over, 62% bets, 75% of the money. But when you look at these high totals, 47 or more, they do go under 67% of the time in the postseason since 2017. I know it was rainy, it was outdoors in the San Fran game, but that was a high total that ended up staying under, and the Bucs are 12-6 to the under. So I kind of like it if you can get a 50, maybe lean under.
Julian, real quick, who's the better matchup for San Fran, Detroit or Tampa?
Oh, God. It's similar.
Fantastic.
I don't think it matters.
We'll get his answer when we come back.
I don't think it matters.
We got some NBA coming up here. 6 games on the docket. We'll get to that when we come back. Basketball isn't the only thing going on here on this Sunday. We got a 6-game NBA slate as well, but if you notice by the numbers here, may not be overly competitive. You know, we got a lot of double-digit favorites here on this slate, but doesn't matter. We're going to break it down. There's something to bet no matter what the spread is, what the total is, what the teams are. I'm talking in an Italian accent.
What is that, your
There's
New
something
Jersey?
going on. Yeah, a little
Sopranos
Jersey
like
coming
it.
out of me here, talking about some NBA. Okay. So slate starts at 3:40, takes us all the way down to 10:10 with Portland Trailblazers and Lakers Eastern time. Let's just go right down the list here and fire off on some of these things here. We got the Nets and Clippers starting us off here this afternoon. Clippers have not covered a double-digit spread so far this season. They're 0-4 ATS with 3-1 straight up in this matchup. Josh, what do you have on this Nets-Clippers game to start us off?
So I just got a player prop for you, Steve. Again,
Sure,
looking at
whatever
this
you wanna do,
game, it opened, Clippers -10. They're up to -11. The total did dip a little bit here, but I'm going to focus on Nick Claxton, over 24.5 points and rebounds. I like to kind of target these lower guys. Obviously, you're going to bet this game. You're going to focus on the big name players, your Hardens, your, give me the other guys. So, Kawhi, Paul George,
Russell Westbrook.
Appreciate you,
a lot
Julian.
of big names.
Yeah, so you're a lot.
Those guys are on the Clippers.
Exactly, and a lot of bettors are going to go over with all these guys. But Claxton, to me, flying under the radar. Points and rebounds over 24.5. It's really juiced up -135. Tells me some liability there on a lesser named player. But this guy is really having his best month of his NBA career. He's averaging almost 15 points a game, 12 rebounds. He's getting 33 minutes per game, so he's getting a lot of time. If you're going to bet player props, I need guys who will get enough minutes to go over these numbers. And he just had 22 points and 14 rebounds against the Lakers. And that game was at, what's not the Staples Center. It's Crypto or whatever it's called now.
Yep.
So he doesn't have to travel. You play the Lakers, now you're going to play the Clippers, no travel involved. I'm going to go Claxton over 24.5 points and rebounds, -135.
Not betting this one because, like you said, Steve, the Clippers just haven't been good as the double-digit favorite. They've been playing so well lately, I do lean to them. But just going off of the VSiN NBA prop bet analyzer, this is one that I've been giving out throughout the season. Mikal Bridges is 30-11 to the under on his point prop. I know everybody likes to bet overs on the best scorer on the team, but he has not been good. And you look at his record against this specific number, which is 22.5, still 29-12 to the under. So Bridges' unders on points have been, a cash cow this year, mostly because that you set it around his specific average on the season. But Bridges has some of those big 30 to 40 point games that boost his average, and when he's not going off, he's generally 18, 19, creeping under that number. So that's one to keep an eye on.
Talk about a team that has been very good at covering has been Orlando. He's been one of the best ATS teams in the league, going 27-15 overall, 6-3 as a home favorite this season. Could be getting Wagner back potentially, listed as questionable for the first time since suffering that right ankle sprain. He's been basically immediately ruled out since then, but this potentially could be back here. Tyler Hero is game time decision with a shoulder injury. Anything in this one here, Julian?
Heat or pass for me. Orlando's been really good against the spread this season. They've been a good story this season. They're a team that I bet to go over their win total this season, and they're going to have to absolutely puke all over themselves not to do that at this point. But now the numbers are catching up a little bit. They're not catching anybody by surprise. Jaime Jaquez Jr. Is not playing in this game for Miami, which I don't love. He's clearly the third rookie, kind of surprisingly, behind Wembanyama and Holmgren this season that has carried this team at times when guys like Jimmy Butler and Bam aren't out there. I think in a pick 'em type of game, I would look for the Heat money line on the road here. Not too much of a daunting trip going over to Orlando. So Miami or pass for me in this one.
Spread's moving a little bit here. Anything on this game?
Yeah, so I initially really like the Heat in this spot. I'm getting a little bit nervous because this line is coming down a little bit. When we walked in the studio, Steve, it was -1.5 Heat. It's down to 1. So this, to me, is why I think betting the NBA is really difficult. The injury reports. Is Tyler Hero going to play? Is Wagner going to play? We don't know, so keep an eye out for that. The reason why I did like the Heat, at least going into it before this line move, was kind of the Heat culture. Off of 2 losses. I think they're going to be dialed in for this game. There really isn't much travel involved. They're 2-0 against Orlando this year. And Orlando struggled a bit. Injuries hit them. They're just 3-8 in their last 11 games. And if you look at road favorites, if basically the Heat close as a favorite, who knows? It could get down to a pick 'em. But if they stay a favorite, that's a good sign. Road favorites are 66% straight up this year. So again, I like the Heat. I'm getting nervous. It's coming back a little bit toward Orlando.
Miami also might be worth a look on the first half line. They've been a good first half team this season. 26-14-2 against the first half spread, whereas Orlando's below 500 at home against the first half spread.
8th time this season that the Nuggets are going to be double-digit favorites in a game. They're 3-4 ATS in that scenario. These teams have been fairly similar offensively. They're kind of lumped together in points per game, but of course, Washington has been one of the worst defensive teams in the league, allowing an average of 125 points per game, while Denver's all the way down at 111. Josh, can Denver do enough offensively to cover the spread?
Oh man, this is one of those games where like I'm having like PTSD to like the Commanders getting 13 points or like, the Arizona Cardinals getting 14 points. And I mean, the Wizards, they do have a few things you like. They were getting 14. They're down to 13.5, 13. They're only getting 27% bets, 61% money. But on a day with all these great NFL games, am I going to risk a unit on the Wizards here, covering this number? I don't think so. So I'm going to go to a guy who cashed for us on the show yesterday. My guy from Israel, Denny Advija.
There we go.
He cashed the over yesterday. I'm going right back to him. He is over points and rebounds, 18.5. Seems kind of low. The over is -120. I know the Nuggets are a good defensive team, but he cashed it yesterday. He's averaging 15.7 rebounds in the month of January. He's gone over this number in 6 of his last 7 games. And I know it's a back-to-back, but he was 23 years old. Steve, remember when you were 23? Limitless energy. We could go back-to-back when we were that young. Back-to-back when you're 36 years old, it gets a little bit more difficult. So give me Advija over.
That was 14 years ago. Thanks a lot. Go ahead, Jordan.
I'm not laying it here with Denver. I don't want to take the points with Washington, who could get blown out on the second leg of the back-to-back. 44% of the bets for 53% of the handle on the over here, but I don't know if I can trust Washington, so I would probably isolate it if I'm going to play this game and play the Denver team total over. I wish they had lost Friday night in Boston, so they had a little bit more oomph to this game to come out kind of hot, but they're still going to win this game in Washington against one of the worst defenses in the league. I would lean Denver team total over.
Speaking of that, Denver won that game against the Celtics, who they beat on Friday there.
Yes.
Boston 8-1 straight up after a loss, 6-3 ATS. The splits here for Houston are amazing, 20-21 overall, but they're 16-6 at home and 7-4 against the spread as a home underdog. A couple injuries to watch in this one. Drew Holiday, game time decision. Horford is questionable in this one too as well. But this is also the beginning of a back-to-back for Boston. They're going to face Dallas tomorrow on Monday, so that could play into how the injury statuses are going to work out for Holiday and Horford. What do you think about this one here, Julian?
Yeah, so it's a bounce-back spot for the Celtics off of a bad loss on Friday night, which I generally like, getting this team angry. Houston, tougher spot to play, and they just smoked Houston last Saturday night at home in Boston. So this is generally one of those revenge spots as well for Houston now getting the Celtics in there. It makes it a little bit difficult of a cap, or more difficult than you would think for a Sunday night Houston Celtics game. That said, if I played it, which team do I trust more? Which team do I think is better? That's the Celtics. So I kind of trust their but bounce back angle a little bit more. Now, the Celtics aren't great against the spread on the road this season overall. They're 8-11-2 ATS on the road, but guess what? They get out and then they take their foot off the gas. They are 16-5 against the first half spread away from home. So I'm not going to lay the big number for the game. Celtics first half laying probably like 5.5, 6 would be where I look on this.
Any interest in anything with Pritchard if either of those guys sit?
Potentially. Houston's a better defensive team, but if maybe Derek White if Holiday's out.
Josh, let's go to the next game here. We're going to go to that Indy and Phoenix Suns games. What are your thoughts on this one?
So I'm going to go over in this one, Steve. It's a really high number here. It opened at 245, 246. It's up to 247.5. But it reminds me of a game we talked about yesterday, the Bucks and the Pistons. That was a really high total too, and that thing flew over. So I'm looking toward the over in this one. If you look at the percentages here, it's kind of a contrarian over, which is kind of a rare opportunity in the NBA. Typically, the public wants to bet overs 9 times out of 10, root for points, exciting game. It's obviously fun to root for an over. When you see these scoring, it's just like a little piece each time they score. You feel like you're getting closer and closer. So there's a psychological kind of bias toward overs. However, this over is only getting 45% of bets. I think the public just gets tripped up on these totals when they see 245, 247, 248. They seem so high. If you go back 5-10 years ago, you would never see a total this high. Now they're kind of routine in today's NBA. So even though only 45% of bets over, the total's rising. Tells me we have a contrarian over spot here. When the total's 240 or more this season, the over is 57%. both these teams are top 10 over teams, top 10 offensive efficiency teams. Pacers are as well a really, really fast-paced team. So I'm looking for a high-scoring game here. I'll go with that over 247.5.
Pacers could rest Halliburton, kind of managing that hamstring injury, played 35 minutes on Friday. Also 1-7 ATS on the back end of a back-to-back.
Yeah, I like that Indy's on the back end of the back-to-back here. I would lay the 5 with Phoenix, or like Josh said, kind of tying into the total, I would play Phoenix's team total over. You got the tired legs with the Pacers, fast pace. They don't play defense, and Phoenix's offense has been clicking lately. They went on the road, beat the Lakers by 18, beat Portland by double digits, huge comeback at home to beat the Kings, and then they go on the road and smoke the Pelicans. So they're kind of hitting their stride here. I think they should do well against this Pacers team in this spot.
College basketball, fast.
We're going to talk about it with Will Hill in the 9:15 segment on this show.
And that's what
Crab cakes, Julian.
I love crab cakes.
That's what you
We
call.
might like the Maryland team.
That's what you call a tease, and that's what Julian just gave you. We're gonna get some propped up. We're gonna get with Jeff Ulrich, top some props for NFL today. We'll be right back here on The Sweat. Welcome back to the Sweat. We kicked Julian off because he couldn't answer that last question. So now it's just going to be Josh and I doing the next segment here. We're going to welcome in Jeff Ulrich, who is going to help us get you some prop bets. I hope Jeff's going to come on. There we go. He had to turn the lights on. Turn the lights on, my friend. I know it's early in your neck of the woods in old Canada, but you got to turn the lights on when we come to you. Jeff, we're going to talk to you about some props, but before we get to that, I want to ask you, what was your biggest takeaway from the two games that we saw yesterday, and why was it that the Packers got robbed and should have won that game?
Yeah, the Packers shot themselves in the foot. I would say my biggest takeaway is just like how not good San Francisco looked.
Yeah.
And then they lost Deebo Samuel. I mean, that's concerning, right? Like, I think that was the biggest shock to me, that not only that the Packers outplayed the San Francisco 49ers, but they were able to sort of outplay them on the road, like outside in San Francisco's home stadium. I mean, that was a little surprising. I'm not shocked that Green Bay put up a fight, but I was shocked at just how bad Brock Purdy looked for most of the game, and just really San Francisco should not have won that game. So definitely changes my mindset a little bit going into the next week, because my initial thought was if San Francisco gets past the Packers, I'm probably going to take them against whoever comes out of that next game. But I got to reevaluate a little bit now before I make that bet.
I said this earlier, and I'm curious what your thought on this. If the Packers had won that, would they have been the team to beat in the NFC? Because I think they would have been from what I saw yesterday.
I mean, I think that the Packers, the way they played down the stretch, I mean, you would, if they had come through, and like I said, they should have won that game. Yeah, it would have been hard not to take them against, Detroit or Tampa Bay. At the same time, I mean, they've lost to both those teams this year. Right. So, and that Green Bay defense has played better, but it's taken steps back in spots too. So I probably would have ended up on Green Bay just because Jordan Love is playing at such a great rate outside of that one pass at the end of the game that everyone wants to seem to focus on. But yeah, I mean, Green Bay next year, really nice future all of a sudden. I mean, that team is drafted extremely well, as they have for most of their, lives in the NFL.
Jeff, it's great to see you. Good morning. I want to get your thoughts on some prop bets for today, or maybe some game bets here. Let's start with this big Tampa Bay game here against Detroit. Now, we've seen a lot of money here flowing in on the Baker Mayfield over. He was at 258.5 passing yards yesterday. Jeff, he's up to 260.5. It's juiced up minus 135. Are you on the Baker Mayfield train today? How do you want to play Baker Mayfield? Do you think this number is getting out of hand? And also, from a game perspective, any love for the points here with the Tampa Bay Bucks?
Man, I hate taking props, buying at the top, so to speak. You never really want to be the last person buying in. It always feels a little bit gross. At the same time, like, you look at this game, I mean, you kind of understand it. I mean, the last four games, Detroit has allowed an average of 379 yards passing per game. We're not talking about like Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. We're talking about Nick Mullins twice. I mean, like this Detroit pass defense is extremely bad. They allow a lot of explosive pass plays. Last week in the wild card round, they allowed 9.9 yards per attempt. I think right now, if I was playing Baker Mayfield, because I did bet Baker Mayfield's over, but I bet it when it was much lower than this, about 10 yards. And I think right now, if you're approaching it, the best way to approach Baker Mayfield would go to the alternate lines. I would probably just take him and Mike Evans on their alternate lines, like Baker Mayfield over 300 yards, Mike Evans over 75, over 80 yards, maybe over 100 yards, and combine them in a same game parlay. You're probably getting a little bit better value at that point. If Baker Mayfield goes over 260, it's probably a good chance Tampa Bay's behind in this game, and Baker Mayfield's going way over, like 300 yards over, like he did last week against the Eagles. So I do still like the over. I do like the Bucks in this game, and I will say this: if the Bucks do cover and potentially win this game, there's a good chance Baker's going to go under, because I think this Bucks defense is playing a little bit better. If they start to sack Jared Goff, he'll just throw the ball less. So those two don't correlate necessarily great, but I do like the Bucks in this game. I like the points with the Bucks. I'm not saying they're going to win outright. I'm just saying I like them to cover. But certainly Baker, I think, more chances than not goes over this number today. If I'm just giving you percentages, again, it just comes down to this Detroit secondary at the very least. It's just bad. It's really bad, and I just don't see it stopping today against Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Rachaad White.
Jeff, this is a loaded slate for running backs. Like, if you look at the running backs that are on this slate, like, all difference makers when you look at it. You got Gibbs, you got White, you got Pacheco, you got Cook, you got Montgomery. So there's a lot of different props that you can choose from the running back position. What are you looking at for this one here? And it's specifically in that Detroit-Tampa Bay game, because depending on how this game plays out, this could end up being more of a Gibbs game, or this could end up being more of a Montgomery game, because they're more apt to give the ball to Montgomery with the lead and more to go to Gibbs if they're trailing from behind.
Yeah, and for me, like again, I think it's going to be a closer game. I think that there's going to be potential lead changes. I could see one team getting out in front and another team kind of playing catch up. For me, I would lean Gibbs props. I would lean receiving props on both sides. Probably my favorite bet, just out of from the two running backs, just taking the Rachaad White over on the receiving yards, 22.5. This number opened at 21.5, so it's moved like a yard, but it hasn't moved crazy or anything like that. Rachaad White went over 22 yards receiving, over 21.5 yards receiving in 13 games this year. And I talk about that Baker Mayfield prop. Baker went over 250 yards passing in 8 games this year. Rachaad White went over his receiving prop in 6 of those 8 games. So those two correlate really well. If we'd like Baker Mayfield to go over, should probably like Rachaad White to be catching passes here. Just an elite pass catching back going up against a team in Detroit doesn't cover very well. They allowed a lot of elite pass catching backs to average about 10 yards per attempt, 10 yards per reception, excuse me. You look at Kamara, you look at Austin Eckler when they went up against this team. I think White's got a good chance to be a very, very important piece today. But I think, to me, it's probably going to be more as a receiver than as a rusher.
Jeff, I'd love to get your thoughts here on the second game, the one that I'm really excited to watch here, the Bills and the Chiefs. Any thoughts here on the game line? Obviously, you have the Buffalo Bills only laying a short number at home, which is interesting. Yet, anytime this game gets to 3, briefly at some books, it's come back down very quickly. Could be a teaser play. I personally like the points with the 3 with Mahomes in Kansas City. But also, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about these great quarterbacks here, Allen and Mahomes. What I noticed in particular is the rushing props for both these guys. Both guys are juiced up to the over. Allen is 42.5 rushing yards over -120. Mahomes is over 27.5 rushing yards at -120. Allen had 74 last week. Mahomes had 41 last week. I think obviously look at these quarterbacks. A lot of people are going to bet over passing yards, touchdowns, completions, attempts, all that kind of stuff. Any thoughts on the game line? But really in particular, do you like either of these QBs to go over their rushing props?
I think it's probably a good fade spot, to be honest, for the rushing props. I think that if I was going to fade one of them, it'd actually probably be Josh Allen, as crazy as that sounds. We're up to 42.5. James Cook is still running the ball well. They attempted a lot of short passes last week. Everything about that game last week probably was more of an under game for rushing, but Josh Allen, just that he had a 50-yard rush, right? So I kind of lean towards the under there. You're getting plus 110. Going up against a pretty solid defense in Kansas City. I know they're not as good against the rush, but that number to me has just gotten a little bit too big. As far as game goes, I do like the Chiefs in this spot as well. I think that, when you just look at the Chiefs record, they're 12-3 straight up in the playoffs with Mahomes. Only one of those losses has come by more than one score. I think if you can still get the 3, that's where I would lean. And I'm with you. I actually teased the Lions down to 0.5 points and teased the Chiefs up to 8.5 points as well earlier in the week. I mean, you could still do that. Obviously, the line has come down on the lines. It's not quite as appealing, but certainly getting the Chiefs through the key numbers through 7. I mean, it's a really good teaser. Like, to me, if the Chiefs lose this game, I just don't see them losing by a lot. So obviously, we're relying on Jared Goff and the Lions to come through in that scenario. But do like the Chiefs, do like the points. I think you could even just play the Chiefs straight up, just given their record, and also just given the Buffalo Bills injury situation, which isn't great right now.
Looking at the wide receiver props here too, I'm shocked at these numbers for Khalil Shakir. If you consider what's happening with this Bills receiver core, so we got Stephon Diggs obviously active, but he's going to get coverage from L'Jarius Sneed, who really shut down Tyreek Hill last week. So we have Diggs with Sneed, and then you got Shakir, who is by far the wide receiver 2 in this offense now, especially with Gabe Davis out. His receptions has gone up. It was at 1.5 yesterday. It's at 2.5 now, but 2.5 is at -166. But his receiving yards still feels pretty soft at 32.5 at -115 to the over. Is there any interest in Shakir? Because I'm looking at this and I go, boy, this is either going to be a monster trap here or he's just going to blow past his total.
I don't think it's a trap at all. I think people are kind of just overlooking it. This is why you're my favorite host, Steve.
Thank you.
Josh, you're my favorite host too. But I mean, because you're reading my mind here. I mean, Shakir overs to me is probably my favorite play of Sunday. And I think you could even take this deeper. I mean, he's averaged over 50 yards receiving over his last 11 games. I mean, let's just play the alternate lines, 50 plus yards at plus 220. He's been a little bit boom or bust. I get that. But again, like we're playing the Chiefs here, this is probably going to be a close game. Really like the Shakir overs. I think if you're looking to fade a player, potentially going under on McCole Hardman in this game as well is interesting. But yeah, I definitely like the Shakir overs. That's one of my favorite props for this slate.
And I just want to throw something out there too as well. There are divisional round specials you can take. We talked about our life for Baker Mayfield to throw 3 touchdowns plus 450 for Baker Mayfield. Something to consider there, a little alternate line. Jeff, thanks for joining us here, dude. We'll talk to you next week. Coming up next, we're going to do a little Kansas City and Buffalo deep dive into that one. Hour number 2 of The Sweat coming up next. number 2, hour number dos for our Spanish watchers. We are here on the Sweat in the final hour.
High-level stuff.
Yeah, thank you very much. Here on the Sweat, we're going to get into what's probably the most anticipated game of today. We're going to get KC at Buffalo. Most notable thing coming into this game here. This is the first real true time that Mahomes has been an underdog in the playoffs here. We'll talk about that in a second. But here's the tail of the tape. I have confirmed this is for the season. So here are your season numbers for KC and Buffalo here. But what I mean by that, Julian, is a true underdog is when he was an underdog before in the playoffs. It was in the Super Bowl against the Eagles, but he was a +1 underdog. He is a 2.5 underdog in this game here. So I guess you could say true underdog here against the Bills. Mahomes as an underdog overall in his career, 9-2-1 ATS. But Buffalo has been phenomenal at home, Josh. 8-1 straight up at home this season. Which way are you leaning in this game? Because quite frankly, if you go on the Twitter universe, this game is literally split down the middle.
Me and Taylor Swift are rooting for the Chiefs today, Steve.
We had to get that in there. Yep,
let's go, Chiefs.
Had to get that in there.
Had to get that in there. It only took an hour to mention Taylor Swift. But, Steve, you know what? Sometimes when we win bets, we forget about them. We're happy. When we lose a bet, we never forget it. So you know what I remember? I remember in the Super Bowl that I was an idiot who took the Philadelphia Eagles. And I took the Eagles there laying a short number.
Yep.
What happened? Mahomes got the last laugh. And I said, you know what, Steve? I will never bet against Mahomes as a dog again. Now, if Mahomes is a dog and he's a trendy dog, then I probably would want to avoid that. But luckily for us as contrarian bettors,
yet somehow hates trendy, loves Taylor Swift.
But you know what?
That doesn't add up.
This guy, man.
I should not have taken the Texans yesterday. I'm still upset about that. But anyway,
way too trendy.
The beautiful thing is that KC is not trendy today. Public's all over the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills are getting 65% of bets. So this is kind of the best of both worlds. You gave the great stat, Steve, of Mahomes as a dog. Not only is he a dog today, but he's only getting 37% of bets, so you can kind of bet against the public. Public is loving the Bills. Obviously, they played great. They were a team that was left for dead. They've won all these games in a row. You know, it's cold, it's not snowy, but you have kind of this kind of love for the Bills this time of year. But I think we're kind of overselling or underselling Kansas City. And again, Kansas City didn't have a great record. They lost games they shouldn't have. Their offense hasn't looked great, but that's fine with me. I'll buy low on KC. This game opened -2.5 Bills. Very briefly, got up to 3 and immediately came back down. That's notable to me because even though the odds makers are juicing up the Bills -2.5, -120, they really don't want to keep that 3 out there for very long for Kansas City. So I would buy up the half point. Again, I don't like buying points in general. I think you're assuming too much juice if you do it all the time, but if you do it selectively around key numbers, I think there's a case to be made. So I'm going to take Kansas City up to +3 at -120. If they lose by 3, I want to cover this number. But aside from the underdog stats here in contrarian play with the Kansas City Chiefs, I just think the Bills have a lot of injuries here. They had a lot of guys who got hurt in that Steelers game. Bernard, Spector, Benford, Rapp, no Gabe Davis, but really they got a lot of guys on defense who are out. So the fact that, again, it really won't go to 3 despite heavy betting with Buffalo tells me there's liability on the Chiefs. So give me that +3. You can tease them up to 8.5, but I got to go Kansas City. Steve, it's very rare in life you get Mahomes as a contrarian dog. I'm taking it today.
Yeah, I will say, too, and Josh brought up a good point. Like, you can just go and buy the extra point here. But if you are going to do that, if you're getting Kansas City at +3, it's at -143. So you're paying an extra, 33 cents.
Yeah,
that's pricey.
It's moved. It's moved today because it was around even money for the 2.5.
Sure.
Now 2.5's just becoming the number with -110 each way.
Which is a good sign a little bit for KC. Yeah.
I put it out in my best bets article on DraftKings Network at 3 -118. I'm happy with that. At this point, I would just play the 2.5 or play the money line. I'm confident in Kansas City. Echo the majority of what Josh said. I thought off the top, Steve, you were going to lead with Mahomes has never played a road playoff game. And we've been hearing all this yapping.
I don't care about that at all.
I don't care. He's played in 3 Super Bowls. You travel for those. One of them was in Tampa Bay against Tampa Bay. And yes, they got smoked, but he's done this. And he's played road games throughout his career. The Chiefs have arguably been a better road team this season than at Arrowhead, which never happens. I have no concerns about the Chiefs going on the road, going into this atmosphere. I think they'll actually rally around this storyline in this atmosphere. Anytime you're sleeping on Mahomes, give me Mahomes in the points. I think they win this one outright. I think Josh Allen's probably more likely to be turnover prone. We're getting a good price on the interception there, which is 14-4 for Josh Allen to throw an interception, including when he threw one against the Chiefs at Arrowhead this season. And I'm on board with teasing to 8.5. Chiefs are one of my favorite teaser pieces in a long time. This is going to be a game. This is going to be a close game. And the one part that Josh left out that I know he is factoring in, Kansas City played Saturday night. Buffalo had a Sunday game. I know. I got you. Don't worry. We have the same take on this game. Saturday night for Kansas City, Buffalo's game moved from Sunday to Monday. 2-day rest advantage in the postseason. That is unheard of at this stage of the season. Give Mahomes and Andy Reid extra time to prep for a team that they know very well.
So a couple of points that you guys brought up that I did want to touch upon here is that if you look at the way the Bills team was constructed, and specifically their defensive side, the team that they're trotting out here today, to nothing that they did, but just the injuries that have amounted. This is like a defense you'd expect maybe in like the final week of the season, because they're playing all of these second and third string guys that just because of injury they've had to put into these starting roles. So there's this narrative out there that, oh, Mahomes is going to carve up this defense. There really isn't anybody that Mahomes can rely upon other than Rice to carve up this defense at this point. And that's where I keep getting hung up. That's where I keep getting to me, I feel like this is a very difficult game to handicap, because you can make a case for either side for me, and I would say, you're right. I'm with you. There's all these narratives out here. There's all these things. Oh, well, Mahomes never playing a road playoff game. I don't give a crap about that. That to me is like one of those narratives that people are using to fit their agenda. That he's never played a road playoff game. Yeah, exactly. But I can't get over that, yes, there are a lot of defensive issues for the Bills, but there's also a lot of offensive issues for the Chiefs as well. So this brings me to another point. How do we feel about the total here? Because the Chiefs have been the worst team at hitting the over in the league. They've only done it 5 times this season, which is crazy to think about, but it also makes a lot of sense, because if we're thinking about it, well, they've had a lot of these issues with offensively. However, of the 5, what?
I'm just laughing at your rant of arguing for both sides of the game, and I can't wait to ask you what you're betting at the end.
I don't know.
He's over here just galaxy braining himself, pounding the table about why both teams are going to win, or why both teams aren't going to win.
Here's the thing. I'm literally trying to work it out in my head live on air so that I can give an answer by the end of the show, and I don't know if that's going to happen. But that being said, talking about this total, so the Kansas City Chiefs have been one of the worst teams at hitting the over. They're 5-13 on the year. However, 4 of those overs have come on the road. Julian, give me an answer so we can at least have something on this show.
I think it stays under. It sounds like if you talked yourself into any play, you would either play the under or the second half under. Which
I do like the under. I can say that.
We know that's been kind of the Chiefs' thing all year. They went, whatever it was, like 5 games in a row with a total of 10 second half points.
Yeah.
3 second half shutouts in a row. I hope that doesn't happen today as a Chiefs bettor. I'm just pulling up the most up-to-date betting splits here. So, yeah, public play on the over at 45.5, 68% of the money for 60% of the handle, 32% for 40 on the under. I'm just trying to think if there's a better way to play the under like that second half trend. The one thing I don't like about betting second halves before a game is that you leave yourself open to, let's say things go the way they're supposed to.
Right.
You still have to cash it at a fair number. But if things go off the rails, you could be looking at a game script that you don't even, it's halftime, you have a bet that hasn't even gone off yet for the second half, and you already don't like it.
Right.
So I would play the under for the game if I played it any certain type of way. But I'm stronger on Kansas City for sure.
Any thoughts on the total?
I lean under here, guys. It opened at 46. It's down to 45.5. Julian mentioned it's a public over, yet the line has fallen. So, again, ask yourself, why is the total falling? If public is betting the over, it tells us smart money here got down on the under. In terms of weather, it's not crazy bad in Buffalo. It's going to be low 20s. It's going to be cold. 10-mile-per-hour winds. The gusts could be up to 20 miles per hour. But one system would be that when the total falls at least a half point, take the under. Just some indication of the line dropping despite public being over. Smart money under, that is 22 and 15, 60% since 2017. You were saying how Chiefs are so bad to the over. Well, let's flip it, Steve. They're great to the under. They're 13 and 5 to the under on the year. That's the best in the NFL. And Sean Hockley, he's 57% to the under. That's one of the best under referees here in the NFL. So I'm kind of with Julian. To me, guys, I don't love having multiple bets on the side and the total, because then it's kind of a weird thing when you're sweating the game what you're rooting for. So I'll stick with the +3, but definitely leaning under here. And I think that would be a benefit to the Chiefs, whose offense hasn't been great this year.
The only time I really liked something same game was last week when it was Kansas City and the under in that Miami game. And Miami maybe was lucky to put points on the board. Just really quick, though, scores between these two teams. Ever since the 42-36 overtime game with whatever, like 4 scores in the last 2 minutes. Last year it was 24-20 Buffalo. This year 20-17 Buffalo. So, you know, staying under that total for the most part.
Props, we talked a lot about Shakir in the last segment here. I'm just going to keep rolling with Rashee Rice here and his overs, 69.5 yards, 6.5 receptions. The 6.5 receptions were at +105 yesterday. It's at -105 here now this morning. But again, like this has been like the only guy that Mahomes has been able to rely upon in this offense. Like even Kelsey, he gets the targets here, but he's not getting anything after the catch. He hasn't scored in like, I think 6 straight games now. I think it's been for Kelsey. So I like going to Rice here. I mentioned this yesterday. Mahomes' passer rating when targeting Rice, 127. Watson, 79. MVS, 75. Kelsey is at 103. What's a prop you like in here, Julian?
Not to be repetitive, but Rice, that's the only guy that I feel I can trust on the Kansas City side. And then the one that I mentioned off the top, it's a very reasonable price for Josh Allen to throw an interception here in a big game against a good defense. He's 14-4 to the over on half a pick.
You were big on Rice last week.
I'll sweat the Rice with one of you guys. Dalton Kincaid, though. I don't know what it is about these tight ends. I'm taking all their overs in the playoffs, but Kincaid over 38.5 this morning. I just looked now, guys. It's 39.5 -135. Steam to the over. Give me Kincaid to get you now 40 or more.
All right, we're going to bring some guests here in the next couple blocks here. Will Hill from VSiN is going to join Julian and Josh to talk these games here. We'll be right back on The Sweat.
What's going on, and welcome back into the sweat here on DraftKings Network. Happy Sunday. We got plenty of football to talk, as well as other sports, Josh. So for the occasion, we are bringing in Mr. Will Hill from our friends over at VSiN. Will, how we doing, dude?
What's going on, guys? It's a little bittersweet. You know, you wake up on a Sunday and you're used to the little countdown to 1 o'clock for all the games to start. And it's one of these Sundays. It started last week with the delay, the postponement, where, man, Sunday at 1 o'clock, we don't have NFL football. We got a little bit of a longer wait. It always feels like a long wait to 1 o'clock to begin with. So only a handful of games left. We got to enjoy them while we can.
Yes, let's do what we can do. Let's start in the NFL. I'll start with the first game, 3 o'clock, Lions and the Bucks. This one for me, you know, I lean to the points with Tampa. I do have Tampa in a teaser. I think this should be a pretty close game. This is the prop game of the weekend for me. I think we're going to see some points indoors. I think it's a great matchup for both quarterbacks to throw the ball. Give me your breakdown on this one, if you have any plays in it, how you see this game shaking out.
Yeah, Tampa seems like a trendy dog. Now, look, the Rams were a trendy dog last week, and they got home. They covered, even though they didn't win the game. It feels like everybody's on Tampa. I like Detroit under a touchdown. I know 6.5. It's a lot of points. I think that's going to be a very hard place for Tampa to go in and win off a short week. There's going to be a lot of crowd noise. It's going to be difficult for the Tampa offensive line. Detroit is good against the run. They are good at rushing the passer. For what it's worth, these teams played in week 6. Tampa did nothing on offense. So, I mean, it was 20-6 in Tampa, and now you're going to switch venues with a more rested Detroit team. Sometimes these teams like Detroit, they don't play well and they still win. Sometimes that's a good sign going forward. So, look, I don't love it. It's not my biggest bet of the weekend, but I know a lot of people on Tampa. I'm going to go the other way. I think Detroit wins this game by 7 to 10 points. A prop I like, and I'll give a shout out to my guy Stuckey from the Action Network. I had him on my podcast Friday. He made a very compelling case for Chris Godwin over, I think it was 63.5, 64.5 passing yards, course shop around. His whole handicap is Kindle Vildor. Vildor, I think I'm pronouncing it right. The second corner for the Lions is very exploitable. One of the worst grades in terms of, you look at all these corners and the metrics they use to guard to measure them. He's been exploited a lot in coverage. So Godwin's going to be on him. You figure they're going to maybe double Evans at times. Godwin could have a big day. I mentioned they played in week 6. There were some guys open for Tampa. Baker just didn't play well, missed a lot of open receivers. So you can exploit this Lions secondary. You can throw it on them. They are good against the run, but you can certainly throw it on them. So especially if, look, Detroit's a 6.5 point favorite in the game. That you figure the game script Tampa's throwing if they get behind early, especially. So Godwin over 63.5, over 20.5 longest reception. I think any of those are good. I think Godwin could have a big day here.
Will Hill, it's great to see you, buddy. Love the quarter zip. Is this a Lombardi line reunion? What's going on, man? But I want to get your take on the second game today, KC and Buffalo. Public here is going with Buffalo. They're getting 63% of bets. They're -2.5. They've been juiced up all week, Will Hill, -2.5, -120. Yet the odds makers won't go to 3, even though the public play is Buffalo. So what's your interpretation of this game? Is this an opportunity to buy low on Buffalo? Would you be interested in teasing up Kansas City 2.5 to 8.5? Would you consider taking the 2.5 or buying it up, Kansas City to 3? How do you think this one plays out? And do you see a lower scoring game? Because we have seen this total fall a bit. Looks like a bit of a sharp underplay.
Yes, my favorite play here is the under. I just think there's a perception, hey, it's Chiefs, it's Bills, it's Mahomes, it's Allen. We think of the 13 seconds game 2 years ago, same round, same time slot actually, where it was 42-36 and it was fireworks. That's not really these teams anymore. We know Kansas City now, they're more of an under team. They don't have the explosiveness. Rice is a good player. He's going to be a good player at receiver. Other than that, they don't have a lot of answers on offense, Kansas City. Kelsey has lost a step. He is clearly not the same player anymore. I mean, look, he's 34. He's been retired a couple times. Gronk has been retired a couple times, and he's older than Gronk. So take that into account, for what it's worth. I just think the Bills under Brady, Joe Brady, the new offensive coordinator who came in at the end of the season, they've been a more run-heavy team. They don't have the explosiveness. So to me, this is like a 23-20 type of game. I just think the perception of these teams doesn't really match the line. Like I said, the Chiefs have been an under machine all year. I think 13-5 to the under. So I like the under. And as far as the side, look, maybe it's square, maybe it's oversimplifying it. I can't lay points against Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs have a rest advantage here. Remember, they played Saturday and they had week 18 pretty much off against the Chargers. They didn't have to play their guys. They got to rest a lot of their key guys that week 18. The Bills have been playing every week, fighting for their lives. Dolphins division championship that Sunday night. Every game has been pretty much elimination for the Bills. Bills have been in the playoffs for 6-7 weeks now, and they played on Monday. and they got beat up. They had a lot of injuries now. A lot of these guys are 50-50. Some of them might play. Who knows how healthy they are? At the end of the day, I think the Bills top to bottom do have a better roster. I can't lay points against Patrick Mahomes. I can't do it. And I think McDermott gets a little tight in these spots. I think, a couple of years ago, same thing, 4th and 1, he punts. He can be a little conservative. Now, Reed can be too, but I don't trust McDermott in this spot. Should be a hell of a game. Should be a lot of fun. I don't hate your idea of teasing the Chiefs up. You figure this will be a one-score game. It should be. This is the game of the weekend. This is really probably the best rivalry in the NFL right now. It was Brady versus Manning for a while. It was Steelers-Ravens for a while. It was 49ers-Seahawks. This is now the third time in 4 years these teams have played in the playoffs. You got two pretty much the faces of the league in Mahomes and Allen. I'm excited for it.
All right, well, before we move over to hoops, I just want to get your thoughts on the two games yesterday. Anything stick out to you in those games, whether it's Texans and Packers losing related or how the Ravens and 49ers looked and what their what their future looks like here, both obviously set up to host the conference championship games?
Yeah, first of all, I should have mentioned, just to go back to Chiefs Bills, I do like Mahomes over rushing yards. I just think he goes back to pass, and there's not a lot of guys open. And hey, this is a playoff game. Look, it's everything's on the line. Break glass in case of emergencies on Mahomes over. I think it's 28.5 rushing yards. As far as the games last night, boy, Green Bay, I know they're young. I know they got a good future. The quarterback's young. The skill guys are young. They left one on the table. I mean, missing the kick. When Aaron Jones broke that run after the punt from Shanahan, and Shanahan had a miserable game last night. That ridiculousness before the half. I didn't like the punt from the +40. He had an awful game. Not a bad game, an awful game. And the 49ers look very beatable. Green Bay left one on the table because when Jones breaks that run, I mean, that game seems over. It looks like the Packers are going to punch it in. It's going to be a 2-score game. And that's going to be it for San Francisco, and would have been a devastating loss for them. And you can say, look, they're young. They'll be back. You never know when you're going to get me back. It's hard in single elimination NFL with injuries. We saw all the injuries this year to quarterbacks. If you're Green Bay, I know the future's bright, but you got to be sick to your stomach flying back home last night. So that was a terrible loss. Baltimore, I thought that was a home victory. If it weren't for the punt return, that game was pretty much over. First half, that was a tough one. I had Ravens first half, so that was a tough beat, but pretty much what I expected. I'll throw this out there just as a thought because we're a couple weeks away from the Super Bowl, 3 weeks away from the Super Bowl. Maybe the AFC is just better than the NFC more than we thought. I mean, you think about it, the Dolphins beat the Cowboys, the Bills killed the Cowboys, the Ravens killed the Lions, the Ravens killed the 49ers. There might be a bigger gap between the AFC and the NFC than we thought. And you think about it, the 49ers, all their losses, they came to the Browns. They came to, PJ Walker, with Cleveland. They got killed by Cincy. They did lose to Minnesota once. So I just think there might be a bigger gap here between the AFC and the NFC than we might have thought at first.
Well, it's a great day of football here, but we do have a college basketball bet that we want to throw your way. Hopefully you're on the same side as Julian and I. I'm going to Michigan State and Maryland, the most heavily bet game of the day. It also seems to be the sharpest bet of the day because the public is all over Michigan State. Sparty's getting 65% of bets, but this line keeps falling toward Maryland. We walked into the studio this morning. Maryland was getting +1.5. They're down to 1 or even a pick 'em. This looks like a really good play here to back Maryland. Conference dog, reverse line move. Maryland's 9-1 at home. Michigan State's 0-3 on the road. Are you going to ride with me and Julian and eat some crab cakes and go Terps today?
Love crab cakes.
I've got Maryland here. It's funny, no football at 1 o'clock, so people need something to bet. So this is, I think, noon Eastern. That's probably why people fill in the void. Hey, I got to bet on something. Watch something to watch, something to bet. So they're taking Maryland. I like the Terps here. Michigan State, look, both these teams have been disappointing, but this is not a vintage Michigan State team. They've only played 3 true road games. They're 0-3 on the road. This is still a talented Maryland team with good guard play. I think this is a good spot here for the Terps. I like Maryland.
I'm going to throw a college hoops future at you real quick, Will, and you can either agree, tell me something else that you like more, but I'm semi-late to the party here. I've already bet some on Kentucky to win it all. They started the season with no bigs. Then they get Bradshaw back, someone I'm a little familiar with because he is from here in the U.S. Now they get this dude, Big Z, I'm not going to try and pronounce his name back, who was drawing like Jokic comparisons. They are stacked, and they are getting these dudes with size back and skill. They looked fantastic yesterday. Kentucky's 13-1 to win it all. This team is rounding into form. I'm adding to Kentucky to win it all. I don't know how you feel about that, or if there's other teams out there that you like at this stage to throw some money on to win it all.
Yeah, I like your play. I mean, I think UConn, we haven't had a back-to-back champion in a long time. I think the Joakim Noah Florida Gators team, but UConn's got a real chance to do it. They check all the boxes. I worry a little bit about Kentucky's rebounding. They're not a good defensive rebounding team, but maybe Big Z here helps that out. I think Kentucky can get them like plus 450 to win that conference too, to win their SEC regular title. So maybe that's one to look at too. But I'm with you. That's a loaded team. One of the best teams Calipari's had in a long time.
I don't mind Arizona in there either. I think they're a team that's getting a little bit slept on. They had some bad losses early in the season. Will, tell people where we can find your work. We got like 30 seconds. What's your podcast called, dude?
Should have bet more. Check it wherever you get podcasts. So appreciate you guys having me on. Had Stuckey on this week, having some great guests next week, breaking down all these games. So got to get you two guys on. I know I got to go through your PR team, your agents, all of that stuff, but love to have you guys on too.
You read my mind. Please contact my agent, Steve Buchanan, and he will let you know when I'm available. All right. We are going to be back as Steve makes faces in the corner. We'll be back soon on the other side of the sweat. We got more football to talk. We got Stormy Bonatoni from VEASAN joining us on the other side.
to the sweat. We got Steve Buchanan, we got Josh Applebaum, we got Julian Edlow. We have a very special guest here too as well. If you watch college football on ESPN, you're gonna see this little lady on the sidelines all the time. It's Stormy Bonantoni coming from us live from the VSiN studios. What's up, girl? How are you?
Hey guys, I'm great. Appreciate you having me. And, as a 49ers fan, yesterday getting through that game was awesome. But I was also a little bit emotional seeing Will Hill on the program before the commercial break wearing a Lombardi line quarter zip. And I'm the literal host of that show and I have no swag. What is happening?
Yeah, that seems to be an issue here too. Like, we're from DraftKings. It's a struggle to get DraftKings swag. Let's talk about this 49ers game, because you know what? You and I are kind of full circle on this. I remember when I used to come on My Guys, I remember one of the first segments was you were giving like a seance to the 49ers, like saying the season is over. And now when we're talking, I'm hosting, and your 49ers are not only in the playoffs, but they're going to the championship round.
Yeah, oh, how the turntables. Yes, I remember we had the RIP headstone out here for my 49ers that their season was over. Yes, things have certainly changed, and kudos to them for a stat that had haunted me all week long, thanks to my co-host and Michael Lombardi, was the 49ers being 0 for the last 30 times that they had been trailing by 5 points or more in the fourth quarter, that they bucked that trend finally against a Green Bay team that was peaking at the right time down the stretch of the season. They were playing some really, really good football. And we saw in the wild card round how the pressure of the postseason did not affect their young quarterback in Jordan Love. But for a guy that had 21 touchdowns and 1 pick over the last 9 games, for him to get picked off twice by big play Dre Greenlaw, and none more important than that one to seal it. Although I was screaming at my television at the top of my lungs, dude, get down. Just get down. What are we doing? But to get out of that game with a win, especially when it felt like at so many moments that there were times that they were just trying to give this game away. Like, we talk about the clock management situation before the half. We talk about Christian McCaffrey having that big touchdown run and then letting the Packers follow it up with a big return. Embry Thomas was a liability. Just throw it to near 20's direction. You're going to get a PI call. Like, there were a lot of things that were very frustrating watching that game. But I think that because of this type of a wake-up call performance they had, that come NFC Championship, they'll be dialed in. And
just real quick, I want to get your opinion on this. The offense really kind of sputtered throughout the game. Was this more of missing Deebo Samuel, or was this because the 49ers were in a rare position where they're playing catch-up and coming from behind?
Yeah, probably a combo of the two, and Deebo Samuel getting more testing on that shoulder. The hopes are that it's not another hairline fracture that kept him out of a couple of games earlier this season. Clearly, the offense has to operate differently when he is not in the game, and we have seen the 49ers struggle historically when Deebo Samuel is not out there on the field. But I think the biggest thing truly wasn't even just that Deebo's out and that they're chasing. It was that Brock Purdy, who I love and who I feel like I am defending week in and week out, was in his head. And I don't know if it was about the rain. I don't know what was going on there, because he started off with the glove, then elected not to do it. Then you see him wiping his hand off mid-play. Like, let's get through this, buddy. You're better than this. And he is a quarterback that I feel like we talk so much about having poise and vision and being able to get the ball out to his receivers before they're there, and just perfect placement. And I was watching that game like, can you throw the ball on target one time, please? And so, good news, I have looked ahead at the weather forecast for next Sunday. Looks like we're going to have sunny skies. So that will be good for Brock Purdy, certainly. Weather conditions are what make me nervous with Brock all of a sudden. And we've seen it a couple times now where the weather has been a factor and he has not played well. So, like I said, sunny skies, and that's what I'm going to look forward to now, depending on who they play coming up.
Stormy, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get into some of these games. Maybe get your thoughts if you have a bet on any of these. Tampa Bay, Detroit, the early game. By the way, I'm jealous in Vegas. This game starts for you at noon. We got to wait a little later on the East Coast. But what's your take on this line move? Because we opened Detroit -6. It got up to 6.5. It even touched 7 at some shops. But over the last couple days, we've seen it come back down. 7s are gone, down to 6.5. The 6.5s are down to 6. The public is all over the Detroit Lions. They're getting 65% of bets. Yet, you have a lot of great ATS stats here on Baker Mayfield as a dog. Better defense here with the Tampa Bay Bucks. What do you think about this one, Stormy? Are you going to take the points with Tampa Bay, or do you think Detroit at home with Eminem in the stands is going to cover this number? Do you have a bet on this game?
Oh, I loved, by the way, Eminem last week going into the game was just like, Matt Stafford, I supported you. I rapped for you in LA. Like, come on, just let us have this one. And so very, very happy, obviously, for Detroit Lions and the organization and their fan base to get that win and move on here. I don't know about the spread necessarily in this game. I kind of lean taking the points with the Bucks, but I feel confident that the Lions are going to win. So I might do a little teaser situation here, tease it down to where Detroit just needs to win the game. And I've actually been having a lot of success with same game teasers, the SGT, if you will. I know people don't like teasing totals, but it's something that I've had a lot of success with lately. And I might just roll with again, where we do the Lions to win and then tick that total down and bet over 43.5, because I don't think anybody is looking at this game and saying, boy, those pass defenses are awesome. This is going to be a really solid under game. So, yeah, I feel pretty confident that we're going to get some points in this spot. It's going to come from both sides. If Baker Mayfield can continue to do what he did throwing the football last week once again, then I think there's reason to believe that we're going to get points on both sides in this one. But maybe even too, if you like Tampa, because I don't feel like this is going to be a blowout type of a game. I think it could fall anywhere from a field goal to maybe a 10-point type thing. You could even tease the other side of it with the Bucks and get more points there and tease it up to 12. So dealer's choice from that standpoint, but I think that there's a lot of money to be made in teasers this weekend.
Well, if you really want to torture yourself, you can do things that I do, like tease Detroit to win and tease Tampa up and try and start hitting windows in the same game. But we can talk about that another day. Yes, it's
that's a whole nother
really,
animal.
Really stressful process. I really enjoy doing that. All right, I do like teasing Kansas City up, though, from 2.5 to 8.5. I think they're my favorite teaser leg of the weekend. We've gone over it on this show. Steve has talked himself into a pretzel on this game. He has no idea what's going to happen. Josh and I are firmly on Kansas City as dogs here, with really my favorite part of the handicap being that Kansas City has these 2 extra days. The Saturday night game all the way to Monday for Buffalo, and then Buffalo has guys on defense dropping like flies. I just think it gives Kansas City a good edge coming into this game. But a lot of people think if it's not now for the Bills, when is it? So, whose time is it in this one to go to Baltimore for the AFC Championship, Stormy?
Sure. I think that there is a lot of pressure on Buffalo, and I hope for Josh Allen and the Bills' sake that they can live up to it and get over this hump, because for the success that they've had against Kansas City in the regular season, they are 3-1 in those games. To be 0-2 in the playoffs, the 13 seconds heard round the world, to have this team cause you problems every time you think that you are a Super Bowl bound team is frustrating. And it doesn't help that, as you referenced, the injuries that they have, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, then you throw in no Gabe Davis once again. It's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle for Buffalo, but something about the way Josh Allen is playing lately, and quite frankly, the touchdown interception ratio that he has in the postseason is very different from what we've seen throughout the regular season. And even in that opening game to start the playoffs for Josh Allen, turnover-free football. If he can continue to do that, and the way that Joe Brady has operated this offense, that, less of the drop back pass game for Josh Allen is more utilize his legs, let him do what he does best, utilize the run game in general, then I think that Buffalo can have success. Either way, I do lean more toward an under in this game, and this is like another potential teaser type thing where you tease the total up and play the under from that side and pair it with the Chiefs if you like, since you said that was your favorite leg of the day, because these teams are not the high-powered offenses that we have come to know and expect, especially when you think about the Kansas City side of things and the drops that they have had from receivers. It's nice that Rashee Rice has really started to separate himself so that Patrick Mahomes has another option aside from Travis Kelce, but they're winning on defense. And you look at them being the best under team in the National Football League this season, 13-5 to the under, including 4 straight games, 5 of their last 6 that they've gone under. Buffalo 11-7 to the under. I think that this is kind of one of those games where it's going to be close, so get yourself some more points with Kansas City and then tease it down to the under.
Yeah, just talking about some of the props there, too. You mentioned Rice. I think we're all aligned on the Rice one there. I love Shakir today, and we were talking to Jeff Ulrich earlier, too. He loves Shakir in this spot as the wide receiver, too, in this offense, because Stephon Diggs is going to see a lot of coverage from Snead, who's by far been their best corner. That leaves a lot open for Shakir at this point, but you look at, his numbers, they're pretty modest, 32.5 receiving yards, 2.5 receptions. I'm not struggling to understand why he's not getting the respect that he probably deserves coming into this game.
Well, I'm still big mad at him because last week, despite the touchdown that obviously the team needed in that moment and ended up being huge, he did not go over his prop last week because that was my thought process going into that game. So he's on my bad side at this current juncture. So I'm actually leaning more toward a Dalton Kincaid situation because his last 3 games, he's been utilized 6+ targets in each of the last 3. You look at the last 2 to close out the regular season against Miami and New England, and both of those 80+ yards. So Kincaid is my guy that I'm trusting slightly more, but I do think that Shakir's going to have success, but I'm not putting my money on it because, we're in a fight at this current.
All right, Lombardi Line is coming up next from 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern. Stormy, as always, thank you for coming on. See you in a couple weeks. That is going to do it for this block here on the Sweat. We'll be right back doing a reset. Give us our best bets. Be right back. block here on the sweat, there is a recap of some of the bets that we like today. I know most of you have watched this entire program, all hour and 45 minutes thus far, but a little bit of a refresher there. Here's what everybody's on here. Sam Laporta, anytime touchdown for me. Applebaum is Tampa Bay +6. Edlow, Baker Mayfield over total passing yards. That was a consensus one there. Rice over total receiving yards for me. Applebaum +3. Edlow, Kansas City money line, but also likes the points as well at +2.5.
Because producer Drew made me take money line there because I said I don't mind the money line earlier in the show.
Yeah, if you
I have Kansas City +3.
If you could hear if you could hear the conversations that those two had in the break, we'd be kicked off the air for the amount of expletives that was given out.
Absolutely ridiculous.
All right, but let's do a little bit of a reset here with final block here of the show. Just kind of go over some of these plays here that we like. Josh, we'll start with you here. We talked about here you like taking the points here with the Buccaneers at +6. Any closing thoughts here? What happens here if the line moves? Because we mentioned in the beginning of the show, this was jumping down to 5.5 at some points. Would get right back up to 6. What are your closing thoughts here on this game?
Yeah, so good point by you, Steve. It has kind of gone back and forth because when we came into the studio this morning, it was trending down toward 5.5. Now it's back to 6, and it might be trending back up to 6.5. So I wouldn't overreact too much in the situation because if you're on Tampa Bay, you're really betting on the fact that they're a contrarian bet, the fact that the public is all over Detroit. And remember, this did touch 7 at one point. So in the situations like this, Steve, to me, I would hold out for that hook. The hook could be really, really important here if they end up losing by 6. I hope they keep it close and win the game or lose by 5 or less. And anyone who takes the points cashes. But because it's the 3 o'clock game, I'd hold out for the 6.5 and get the hook there. And then again, same thing with Kansas City. If you like Kansas City, you can tease them up 2.5 to 8.5. But again, that's a 6:30 game. There's a lot of love in the market for Josh Allen. Bills are getting over 60% of bets. I would hold out for the +3 if you don't want to buy it.
As you speak, +3 for the Chiefs now. Just changed.
See what happens when Drew strong arms me into the money line, and now the exact bet that I want is available on the board. Chiefs +3 -115.
Yep.
Here's something to monitor though. How long will that 3 be available?
That's literally what I was just.
I want it to go right back down to 2.5.
Yeah.
So what is this?
So let me ask you.
We'll
throw this back to you.
Yep.
So it's up to 3 right now. What does it tell you if this gets back down to 2.5? We'll say in the next half hour.
So I think it's important not to just look at line moves like in a box, but look at how long they stay at a certain number. So, for example, if this goes to 3 and it stays 3 and it closes 3, that's kind of a better sign for Buffalo. But when you look at line moves, to me the question is the money that moved the number, Julian, and then how long does it stay there? Because if it's 3 and immediately gets right back down to 2.5, that's a great sign.
It's going the other way where it was just 3 -115. It's now 3 -112.
So let's come back down. I'm hoping it comes back down to the Chiefs. That's a good sign for Kansas City.
So let me ask you this in here too. So you're watching this happen in real time. When is the time to bet it at this point? Because what if this keeps continuously happening throughout the afternoon? Like, when do you think is the time to pounce on this? Like, is it now? Do you wait this out later on because maybe you're getting a worse number later? Because we talked about it earlier in the show, right? If you want to just go ahead and buy the 3, it was at -143. That was 15 minutes ago. When is the time to pounce on this?
I think it's your preference in terms of the juice price. Like, I think in your head, you should have a number that, hey, I don't really want to go above that. So for me, if I'm buying half point, really like -125 is kind of my limit. -120 is really my goal. But again, in a situation like this, like if you can now get Kansas City at +3, you don't have to buy it up and you're -115, -120, I'll play that right now. Conversely, if you like Buffalo, you probably want to make sure you get that 2.5 because this thing could end up closing at 3. But let's see where this thing goes back and forth. Again, there's early, liability juice-wise to Buffalo, but again, getting Mahomes and getting points and getting a 3 to me is the way to go.
What do you think?
I think the time to bet it is right now. You're getting +3 -112. That's 2 cents off of your standard line. There's no way in hell this is getting to 3.5 or anywhere close to it. You're not getting even money on the 3 and going to be able to buy it. It's if you like Kansas City, it's not going to get better. Maybe it goes to a 3 -108, and you can probably live with that.
It's just semantics juice. At that
it's
point,
not getting. It's not getting beyond that.
If you were to take an alt line currently of 3.5, you're getting that at -138. So a couple cents less than when you were getting the 3 earlier.
Very crucial hook in a game like this, but not worth 138.
So I will say that if we are going to get 3, then I would be back in the Chiefs in that scenario. The pretzel has been undone. Things have changed. Lines and odds subject to change. And so is my opinion.
Congratulations.
I was in a pretzel earlier, so the show
Let's go.
is about to
Let's go,
end,
Steve.
and we do have a solidified bet for me here in Chiefs Bills. I will take the Chiefs at +3. Let's go back to that game, the Chiefs and Bills. We just touched upon. Before that, is there anything else in Tampa Bay, Detroit that you want to hit?
Can I give a note on Tampa Bay, Detroit real quick? Breaking news. Every time that Trey Palmer has woken up and tweeted that he is pissed off, he has gone on to score a touchdown in that game. Trey Palmer has woken up and tweeted that he is pissed off.
So what's the
Plus
price?
450 anytime touchdown score. This is you don't you're host betting shows, you don't know this trend?
I'm sorry, there's so much
Even I don't
crap
have
that
the
I have
system,
to shift
Steve,
through
yeah.
that
It is
I
the
didn't get to
system.
that one.
Seriously, it's like I didn't count how many times. It's like 6-7 times that he's woken up and tweeted he's pissed off. He scores a touchdown. He did it last week. He scored a touchdown. He might be catching on to something here. He did it again, so he's going to score today in Detroit.
Can I throw one more at you for that game?
I hope it's not something like that.
It's K Dotton. We opened this show. K Dotton was over 29.5 -110. We just talked about the importance of juice and movement. K Dotton is now over 29.5 -130. So that's a good sign if you want to take that Dotton over late money breaking. I think we should take some credit for that K Dotton. I think it should be the sweat steam on the Dotton over. Let's get 30 or more.
Okay. So really kind of blown away by this Palmer thing. I'm not going to lie, that kind of took me a little
Found it?
off guard. I didn't look. I'm just going to take your word for it. Let's go back to the Chiefs and Bills game. What are obviously we just talked extensively about the spread here. Any closing thoughts on this one? I still really like Shakir in this one. I'm actually kind of toying with him scoring an anytime touchdown. I'm actually starting to kind of get on that a little bit more too as I talk myself into this because I really think that Snead is going to lock Diggs down. Like Tyreek Hill said after that game, that was one of the toughest guys in coverage that he's faced so far this year. And when you think about some of the guys that Hill had to face this year and was absolutely blowing past, to give that type of credit to Snead, then that could really mean some tough things for Diggs. Because let's not forget, too, even before that, before this game, Diggs has really been a non-factor aside from that last game there. And they were really trying to get him the ball, and he wasn't even overly efficient. Now he's going to get that lockdown coverage with Snead. It's really just making me like Shakir more and more. So obviously I like the over on receiving yards for him too. I'm going to end up on the anytime touchdown. Anything else we like from this game here specifically?
I just think on that topic, Steve, I think you're spot on because if you look at Stephon Diggs receiving prop right now, it's 62.5. Under -130. It's very rare. You get
I've been playing that really the second half of the season.
That's a great
It burned
sign.
me last week. He did get the over last week, but that has been a cash cow in the second half of the season, at least for Diggs.
I think Shakir-wise, we can look at alts.
I'm with you. Yeah.
And it's an interesting scale here on DK Sportsbook. 63.5 is 500. I don't know if I want to go that high, but the one that is catching my eye here, 45.5 plus 210.
Yep.
You're getting more than twice your money back on a very reasonable number, it seems. And if that matchup that you're talking about with Diggs comes to fruition and no Gabe Davis, and you've got to look somewhere, this is a dude that's been doing it, and you got the Miami game as kind of the outline, 6 grabs on 6 targets for 105 yards.
All right, let's talk about what we could be talking about next week, championship round next week. What do you guys think are the most likely matchups that we will see in each conference? Josh, I'm going to start with you.
So I think looking at some of these look-ahead lines that are available across the market, one thing that we've seen is some possible numbers here. One thing that caught my eye was if you look at who San Fran is going to play. Like if San Fran ends up playing Detroit, I think the early number right now is San Fran -7. I think there's one book that might be 7.5. Julian mentioned that to me earlier. If it's Tampa Bay, that line will be 10. So either way, and monitor
Maybe 11.
Maybe 11, yeah. Deebo Samuel, is he going to play or not? I think there's a tweet that just came out that he should be good to go, but again, that's a big injury to monitor. I'm leaning the dogs here. I want to see how the market develops, but if there's a situation where, public loads up on San Francisco, they don't love these dogs, you get a reverse line move to one of these dogs. To me, if it's Detroit and they win today and they are favored by 6, even though I am, sweating and rooting for the Tampa Bay Bucks +6, I would look toward Detroit +7. Campbell is great ATS as a dog. I think they have an offense that can maybe keep up and cover the number against San Fran.
It's going to be San Francisco laying 7.5 hosting Detroit. It's going to be Baltimore laying 3.5 hosting Kansas City.
Yesterday, you were talking about taking San Francisco, it was a little bit juicy, at -180 to win the conference. That is -320 at this point in time.
That's just splitting the money line price between a 7 and 11 point favorite. So whatever, you call the spread 9 because we don't know what it's going to be. Or I guess more towards 7 since the Lions are favored. It's more likely to be the Lions 8.5 point favorite. That's what your money line is.
And then AFC, we got Ravens at -170, Bills +280, Kansas City +450 to win the conference. Any thought on taking any of those guys here, or did Baltimore just absolutely dominate and there's nothing else you can do here?
So I don't like any of those minus numbers, Steve, but what I would do right now is take Ravens plus 200 to win the Super Bowl.
Sure.
Will Hill came on. I think he made a great point that the AFC may be better than the NFC this year. If you're getting plus 200, if they win the next game, it becomes a Super Bowl. I mean, you're not going to get a plus, you're going to get a small plus money number there if they're a small dog against San Fran. But I think the plus 200 Ravens, hit it right now if you like them.
Kansas City plus 450, AFC, I don't mind that.
I mean, that's a tough number to pass up right now.
Well,
You're going to win, and then you can do whatever you
Yeah.
want with your hedging next
Right.
weekend.
Yeah. So definitely some hedging opportunities coming up here as we dwindle these teams down. Just a handful after today. That is going to do it for this edition of The Sweat. Want to thank Will Hill and Stormy Buonantony for joining us, for Josh Applebaum, for Julian Edlow, for Steve Buchanan. We will be back here on Saturday, 8 a.m. Eastern. A lot to talk about. We'll catch you then.
Let's go Chiefs.